Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the How to Choose Happiness and Freedom Show. I'm your host, Lauren Foster, happiness teacher and founder of Be Happy First. And I'm so happy to have today with me Dr. Moira Forsythe. She is the author of Infinite Journey. And the way I met her is because we share a publisher. Sue Erda at Powerfully Publishing is just absolutely awesome at connecting me with amazing people. So welcome so much, Moira, and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Yay. So we always start off at the first thing I always say is how I know you, because I always have guests on my show that we have some sort of connection, so we've met, we know somebody in common. And then the next thing I like to do is to give you the opportunity to tell us who you are. Tell us what makes Moira Moira today, and and bring us up to today when you wrote this amazing book.
I'm not sure we have enough time for all of that, but I am an executive coach. My background actually is in medicine, where I am a traditional naturopath. I had a very large practice in central Colorado for about 15 years, a little bit longer with working with folks with health and wellness. And as I began to be asked to speak nationally and then internationally, I realized I couldn't service individual patients. And so I moved into the field of coaching, which is really what naturopathy is to a large degree. It's guiding people to find the answers that serve them most and most individually. And we're all a little bit different. We're all the same, but we're all a little bit different. And that journey into coaching started for me about 20 years ago. And since then, I've gone on to gain about 5 different national and international certifications and accreditations in different disciplines of coaching, both business coaching, personal coaching, wellness coaching, group coaching. And they all dovetail together, bringing in those basic aspects of how we choose the life that we live. And for me, it's just such a thrill to be able to support people to experience their best life, because it's such a short period of time to not be filled with joy. And I love the title of your podcast, that happiness and freedom, because those are 2 core values for me that I've lived by for all of my life.
Right.
So that's a little bit about me. I live at 8,500 feet, almost 9,000 feet here in the Rocky Mountains. And I am very active outdoors. I was a mountaineering guide for a number of years, and I still explore the mountains every day on the trails, interacting with all sorts of amazing wildlife and weather. And those things give me inspiration for continuing to connect people to the real core essence of who we are as humans, which is, we're natural creatures on this natural planet. And I think we've been drifting a little bit away from that. And that's bringing challenges that I know the coaching training that I have can support people in facing and dealing with.
Yeah, so I did not realize that you were a naturopath, which is so synchronous because I mean, everything that I teach is spirit-based, is heart-based, is mind-based, is all of this, but I'm also a primal health coach. And
Right.
so I really, really believe that we physically could interact with our environment in such healthier ways, and being out in nature. And I live in the middle of nowhere on the side of a mountain, and my cottage is like a tree house in the
Yeah.
mountain with
Nice.
all my fur babies. So that's awesome. Now we're gonna fast forward to currently, but I'm curious as to what led you to become a naturopath, and where did you get the courage and that's the road less traveled.
And it definitely was at the time that I went into medicine. Women were still not that predominant a demographic in the field of science. And my undergraduate at Georgetown, I was in probably only the third entry class that allowed women into the college. So that was an interesting time. And also in the time of Title IX, when I went to Georgetown, there was no women's locker room. So when I ran track with the guys, I had to shower elsewhere, things like that. And my interest in medicine came from the journey that I watched my father go on for many years, where he was faced with a lot of serious health challenges at a time when the cut and burn perspective was still the predominant way of interacting with those challenges. And in watching that,
Wait,
and
what does cut and burn mean? That's
well, that's kind of the motto of medicine is cut it out, burn it out, and it
okay, got
helps to
got it.
support the system
Mhm.
to heal itself.
Right.
And in watching the lack of success with that approach on somebody who I loved very dearly, I was in that aspect of curiosity, which is one of the first four concepts in the book, around what else is possible? What's another way of approaching creating health and balance? And so I was on that quest from a very young age, probably 10 or 11. And I began reading all sorts of science books and looking at different, I received a couple of grants from the American Heart Association for summer research projects, and was on that trajectory for a good 15 years from a very young age, and still wasn't finding answers and solutions that felt appropriate. And it wasn't until I took a leave of absence from medical school and was introduced to herbalists and acupuncturists and raw foodists in California that I thought, wow, here's another way of looking at how we support ourselves. And so ultimately, I did go back to school for my degree in naturopathy, which was much more holistically based and herbally based. And my specialty was in 5 element Chinese acupuncture. So that system also looks at the 5 seasons of the year, how we respond and interact, where our challenges are, and how we support ourselves through those challenges. And so that's a little bit of how I came to really looking at how to stay healthy and happy and support myself and encourage others to do the same.
It's fascinating. We could do a whole show just on what you just said right there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so but fast forward to today. So you spent all of this time and all of this experience gaining these amazing skills and knowledge and expertise. And so how is that packaged together now in the way that you're teaching and coaching and presenting to the world?
Well, I've got to go back to that quote from Einstein that says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. And so I'm finding that people are experiencing problems or challenges, as I like to call them. I think everything that we encounter is an opportunity to learn and grow. And again, this short space of time that we're here in this form, in this existence, it is about how can we evolve our souls and our inner core to be um, productive and to create something new in the space that we're given and in the short time that we're given. And so in looking at that, not being able to solve our problems from the same thinking that we use to create them, I'm always in that question of curiosity, that place of curiosity in terms of looking at what is the meaning behind this, what are we giving meaning to, and what may be the real truth behind it. Um, so it's always about seeing what's next and what else is possible.
Yeah, I completely love that. And so one of the big missions at Be Happy First is to try to teach everybody that your happiness does not depend on circumstances
Exactly.
unless you allow it. And it kills me that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones that we have the most trouble reaching. And I had a dear loved one say, oh, my depression is lifted 15% because my parents could get a COVID shot. I'm like, oh, well, why do we have to wait for a vaccine in order to be happy? Why do we have to wait for anything? And that it's simple, but it's not easy to.
Correct. No, that's a great way to put it. It is simple. It can be very simple. I think in the technologically advanced world that we're in right now, we tend to overcomplicate things. And we're in a very interesting time where we do get to choose which path we go down on this journey that we're on.
Right?
Is it the more complex, um, convoluted, interesting pathway that many have chosen, or is there a simpler, easier way that lets us continue to live into those things that bring us joy? So, that it was interesting that that quote from Einstein is from over 100 years ago, and I was rereading one of Eckhart Tolle's books, Power of Now, and 2 decades ago he spoke to the dysfunction of the human mind that is visible to everybody, and that the greater the number of people who realize the urgent need for radical change in human consciousness, that's what's required if we're not going to destroy ourselves and the planet. And so for me, coaching is a way of supporting that deeper inner questioning that everybody has. Everybody's in that curiosity around, really, is this all there is, or is there something more to it? And if so, how do I get to that more level? And coaching allows a container for people to come and feel safe and feel supported. And the best coaches are not consultants. They don't give people answers. They give them tools to dig into their own reservoir of wisdom and find the answers that are true. So
True for
that's
them.
how coaching fits into all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now do you coach one-on-one, or are you doing group coaching, or are you what's your current
You know, currently I work one-on-one with select clients, and I typically work with individuals for anywhere from a year to 3 years at a time, because it takes time to really peel back the layers of confusion that may exist for someone, even if they're developing a business or have an existing business that they're trying to take to another level. But I'm also finding that the time that we're in requires a little bit faster change and transformation. So the group coaching piece is growing for me in my practice, and bringing systems of mindset mastery to organizations is really where I see the most powerful input being today. So that's what I've been developing and been delivering in the last year.
okay, fantastic. All right, so tell us about Infinite Journeys. This is Romeo.
Well, Infinite Journey came out of the initiative that I started in March of last year as the whole coronavirus event was unfolding for America. It had been present in some other countries already. But as I watched the response that was coming from both higher systemic level, so from the government, from our medical system and healthcare providers, and watching what was happening in communities as businesses were shutting down and people were losing employment, and losing economic growth and maintenance, I really had a sense that there was going to be a need for um, emotional support, psychological support. And as I looked at where that support might be, I was not finding a lot of resources available that were giving attention to that yet. And so I started pulling together other coaches who also had a sense of the power that coaching can bring for finding solutions, finding answers, and also bringing people peace with whatever it was they were up against. And we formed Coaches That Care, which coachesthatcare.org is where people can get more information on that. And the intention was to give no cost coaching, at least 1 month's worth of structure, to people who were suddenly dumped into this new world that they were experiencing. And so I pulled together a number of coaches, master level coaches in different disciplines, financial advisors, relationship coaches, just a number of different people who said, yes, I want to help. And as we worked through the summer and people began to get used to kind of this new reality, I realized there had to be another way to reach even more folks. And the book sprang from that desire to have something that could be used as a resource for people on an ongoing basis, something they could pick up in the evening when they were wondering what to do next, or just open up in the morning and get some inspiration from. And so that's where the book came from.
Okay, tell me the whole title, Infinite Journey. There's 4 C's.
There are 4 C's. I am a big alliteration person, and I looked at how do I coach? What's the process I take people through? And how could I make that relatable to anybody? And so the 4 principles that are in the book are curiosity, clarity, courage, and congruence. And moving through those 4 in that order is what I've found brings that aspect of balance and peace and serenity to people who are in hugely disruptive circumstances, which is what we're in right now globally. It's just a very disruptive time in terms of how all systems are delivering their mission.
So curiosity was the first one and congruity was the last one. What were the ones in between?
Clarity and then courage. And so
Courage.
curiosity is about asking those questions and being open to the possibilities and the what if places. And so in each section, we have exercises for people to go through and to try on. And it's kind of a fun thing to experiment with a partner or a friend and ask some of the go through some of the exercises. But through that curiosity, you start to gain a sense of clarity. You start to realize where it is you need to put your focus and your attention. And from that focus, you can then create solutions. And once you have those solutions and some clarity around what it is you would like to see happen, that's where the courage comes in, because you got to step into action for anything to truly change or to bring you what it is you desire.
Right.
And so courage is about finding the confidence to act, maintaining hope that that action will bring you what you want, and also grounding your commitment to those values and those ideas that you obtain in the clarity piece in order to bring it all together. And that's what the congruence is that authentic harmony that results. That's also where I put in aspects of resilience. Right now, I'm finishing up my positive psychology practitioner certification because, last year we had a lot of time to do a lot of things that we may not have had time for. And the positive psychology is something that I wrote my coaching thesis paper on years ago, but had not gotten any certification in. So I did that this year and just about finished with it. And that congruence piece is where the joy is. It's where when you're in congruence, you have that connection with self and connection with what I call the divine, whatever that is, whatever you want to call it or refer to it as, but that universal consciousness that influences truly everything that we do experience and that we are connected to. So congruence is a place to continue to travel towards as you have new questions that pop up. And what I find is that people will go back through that process repeatedly as different segments of their life present the unknown and present, questions for them to answer. But it's a fun process to take a look at and to incorporate into how you approach almost anything in your life. And it works really well.
Yeah, I am absolutely positive that it will. I'm totally going to pick up a copy of the book, and I'm going to come back in a minute and ask you for maybe a couple of examples of some of the exercises that you do. But so congruence to me, that feels like when your highest self, your spirit, your body, your actions are all aligned, or all congruent.
Yes.
Is that am I understanding that correctly?
Alignment is absolutely a synonym you could use for congruence.
Yeah.
And the world we live in is constantly pulling us out of alignment with ourselves. There's so many distracting elements that we have in our life every day that it's the most challenging piece for people to not only understand, but to wrap their minds around how they can achieve it. But it's absolutely worth the effort. And if you go through that aspect of getting clarity, identifying your values, we've got a values list in the book that has 100 different values to consider, and then exercises on how to get clarity around which truly are your values that you're living into or not. And as people say, oh, my values are joy and happiness, and yet they are complaining every day, there's this incongruency that they can start to recognize for themselves, or they can have someone else point out to them. And that's one of the exercises is, identify your top 5 values and then ask someone who knows you what they think your values are. And then you start to see, I want to live into this, but this is how I'm showing up. And that's incongruent. And so what can I do to bridge the gap and to bring myself more into congruency, more into authentic harmony within myself? And if you're willing to kind of take that journey with yourself, the results are so amazingly wonderful that every step along the way starts to reinforce why you would do that and why you would choose to live in that manner.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really awesome. And just as a side note, for wherever you're watching this video or listening to the podcast, if you look down, there'll be a show notes section or comments, or somewhere down there, you'll be able to find links to get to Moira, to learn more about her, to learn to buy the book, to really tap into all of this amazing teaching that she's offering us today. So wherever you are, just look down. And okay, so curiosity comes very naturally to me because I just was born a questioner. I'm like, really, all the time. But a lot of people, and I was given the freedom as a child to question and to let things go. Not everybody had that freedom. A lot of us were like, this is the way it is, and don't talk back to your elders. And so we get that curiosity trained out of us.
We
So
do.
how do we get it back? What are some simple things that our listeners could start doing today to start reawakening their curiosity and opening up their minds? And
Well, because I wrote a lot of this during this time of social isolation, where people were being asked not to interact with one another, there are several suggestions in the book for how to reestablish connection with yourself on a deeper level and then with others. And one of the suggestions I have is to simply step outside, sit down, whether it's on your stoop, your porch, a rock that's nearby, and use your breath to empty your mind and relax for a moment and then notice. Just notice what you notice. Do you hear interesting noises? Do you see something moving? And in the noticing, what questions come up for you? What kind of bird is that? Where's that sound coming from? And then because we have access to so much technology, where might you find an answer to that question that just popped up for you? And so the question could be as simple as, why is this rock so cold on my butt? And I mean, I think we tend, because we've been immersed in this complexity of technology, we tend to make it more difficult than it needs to be. And so throughout the book, there's several stories that I share of just delightful interactions with my grandchildren. I have two grandchildren that are absolutely one of the big joys of my life currently. They are 6 and 8. And so they're in that stage where they ask questions from the moment their eyes pop open until long after they're shut at night. They're still kind of yammering around, how come? Why is this? What is this? And so I think simply looking at younger individuals in our lives can give us a sense of what curiosity can look like. So again, encouraging interaction with someone who may be unknown to you, but in your life. So things like your UPS man who has been delivering everything that we sustain ourselves with these days, or a mailman, or a grocery clerk. Are you curious about who they are, where they live? Are they married? Do they have children? What do they do for fun? How long do they work? How long have they been in that job? Once you get started down that path of curiosity, it's interesting that the door flings itself wide open and all sorts of questions come in. And so my encouragement to anyone listening is, don't be afraid of being curious. It's actually a very fun place to be, which is why children laugh so much on the playground, because they're just having fun with being curious. And you can reconnect with that fun and that joy, whatever your life is like, by allowing curiosity to flow through you in that same way.
that's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm actually working through the Wayne Dyer book on the Tao Te Ching, that change your thoughts, change your life. And the verse that I studied today is very much like everything that you just said, that
Of course it is.
yeah, because that's the way the world works, right? That's the way the
Absolutely.
universe comes
Absolutely.
together. Yeah. And so if you are completely open to the opinions of others, if you're completely open to new ideas and fresh perspectives on things, and instead of allowing your ego to insist that you be right, instead of being happy and, kind of having a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. Is that how he said it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's
And
perfect.
I think my training in Chinese medicine really connected me to that mindset of unattachment. And the Tao was a huge part of my own spiritual growth many, many years ago, because it was simple. It is simple,
Yes.
and it's grounded in nature, which is it is what we are and what we're from and what we should be. And I don't use a lot of shoulds, but it's what we should be connected to in some way. And so for people who are living in a more urban area with less access to the kind of brilliant nature that I have access to here in the mountains, there is a tree in your neighborhood somewhere. There is a blade of grass. There is a weed growing. So be curious about how it's growing, why it's there, what it is, what it does, what its purpose is, who eats it. All of these things, again, once you start down that path of curiosity, it's an expansive, infinite field.
Right.
So and it's just a training, a self-training that will translate into other areas of your life. And I think that's the piece that I think I would like to have others embrace is as we question these simple little things, are we also questioning the bigger things that we're connected to, the way our financial system is set up, the way our compensation for effort is arranged when people are giving of themselves, the way we honor women who are home with their children and not being compensated in any recognizable way, but expending an enormous amount of energy and work effort to sustain and nurture our next generation that will be taking care of us. So begin to question all of these things with an openness to whatever comes to you as a possible answer. And that's the other piece of it is, and that's the letting go of ego that you just spoke about, is being open to whatever presents itself as a potential option for consideration and knowing that there's always, always, always another option, always.
Right. And so all of this is working towards getting your mind in the land of the solution that Edison talked about, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Okay. So then after curiosity, we come to clarity. And but all of the work around curiosity is helping to these are leading into one another, right?
Well, if you don't question what your values are, you lose the opportunity to actually live into them. And
That's
you
it.
lose the opportunity to be able to recognize those things that support you living into your values. So the clarity section has, like I said, a whole values list. And we talk about how values are our own definition of what those words may mean. And so again, maintain some openness about how you define a word like freedom. Freedom means something very different to different people. A word like love, a word like teamwork. All of those words mean what meaning we give them. However, being able to recognize what feels important to you allows you to recognize what honors that importance.
Right.
And it also gives you a chance to decide what is important to you. And I think a lot of people move through life without identifying that for themselves and simply take on whatever assignment they're given and whatever role they're assigned. And that's one of the pieces in academia that I see getting challenged today. And I think this last year is just brilliant for having disrupted how we educate young people. Why aren't we training them with skills for creating beautiful homes and creating beautiful garments and knitting beautiful things to wear so that we continue some of these artistic expressions that humanity has created for themselves, painting and weaving and pottery and all of these things that we use every day that we've drifted away from honoring
Right.
as a useful expression of someone's talents. And so academia is looking at, is this 8 hours a day in a chair looking at a screen necessarily the best way to nurture the talents that exist within each individual? So
Right. And I love that. I love that. I mean, we become such a disposable society that if we could bring our attention back to honoring the spirit of things, the soul of things, that I think that's beautiful too. Okay, so that next is courage. And I always think that if we're when we're in pursuit of our dreams, we're always going to be required to step into unknown territory, and step towards the edge of our comfort zone. And nobody has confidence when they're doing something for the first time. So that's when you have to have the courage to do it anyway. And to me, so talk to me about how you're teaching courage and what that looks like in your book and elsewhere.
Well, courage and having that confidence to be daring, to try something that you may not have tried before, or that you may have tried in the past and had a less than delightful experience with. So I think that it comes down again to redefining some of the language we use around our experiences. And so the way I just described, trying something that you may not have had a great experience with could also be called failure. Well, there's no failure. There's simply things working out differently than you had expected. And so being open again to whatever comes your way, if you're grounded in who you are, which is that value piece again, if you're grounded in who that is for yourself, what feels good, being able to honor the feelings that give you the answers that are true for you, which for us women, it's intuition. Again, we're not necessarily in a culture that trains us to honor intuition, and we
Right.
need to get back to some of that. And that's that connection with the ethereal, with the unknown and the unquantifiable, with the divine. If we can get back to honoring those connections, then we will always have the courage needed to face circumstances that arise for us. I think we tend to limit ourselves in what's possible. And so that's back to the curiosity piece. If you
Right.
can open yourself up to a reality where anything is possible and
Mhm.
everything is possible, then courage becomes just a natural extension of stepping into that possibility. And so there are exercises for how to comfortably step into experiencing that a little bit for yourself. It's like any other skill set. With practice, you can become better at it. And
Right.
so there are a couple of practice steps that you can take that are little steps. And they're typically connected to those first two principles of curiosity and clarity. It takes a little bit of courage to ask your grocer what his name is. It takes a little bit of stepping outside yourself to experience something new. And yet, when you realize that the tiger isn't going to leap out of a tree and bite your head off, you start to gain confidence in being able to do it again, do it in a slightly bigger way, and also being able to process whatever comes back to you as not a failure, but simply an opportunity for learning what does work and learning what works not as well as you might like it to. And so being able to adapt and modify and grow things. And that's that piece of coaching that comes from working with businesses that are trying to pivot and change their approaches, change their strategies, change their marketing. I think we've got to bring some of those same principles to our own personal experience in order to really find our highest and best selves and bring that out into the world. And we definitely do owe it to ourselves to do that.
I love that analogy, and I think it's completely true that building a life is very similar to building a business, with all of those elements. Okay, so that brings us to congruence, which so we started with curiosity, we started with opening our minds and our imaginations and gaining clarity about what it is that we really value and what we really want, and then having the courage and the faith and the hope to explore all of the things that we've learned through our curiosity and our clarity and to bring ourselves closer to that. And then that brings us to congruence, putting
And
everything
well,
together, right?
hopefully it brings us to congruence. And that's where the courage piece shows itself to be well grounded within yourself or not. Because if you lack the courage to step into commitment to yourself, then you won't ever experience an authentic existence, if you will. And authenticity really requires being able to face where things are not in alignment with who you choose to be and who you know your best self is, and to be able to say no to individuals, to experiences, to options that are out there. So I think that going through those first three principles will give you a lot of personal power for creating the life that you want to create. And like you said earlier, it's simple, but it's not easy. And yet, all of the individuals and icons that we admire in our culture are examples of pushing through the effort and bringing the effort to their lives in order to achieve whatever it is we admire them for, whether it's in the arena of politics or sports or literature or art. we admire those who have pushed through with courage to find that place of harmony, balance, authenticity of expression for themselves. And what people don't often recognize and realize is that in that authenticity is the kernel of joy, of inner joy and happiness that I believe is truly our birthright and what we're designed to move through this world emanating joy. Are you happy? Are the things you're doing bringing you joy? Which is such a simple question to ask yourself each day as you look at that long list of things to do. What are those things that bring you joy?
Right.
And you can look at those things that feel like must do's. I must get my taxes done. Well, in what way could I do it that brings me joy? Handing it off to somebody else who really loves looking at the numbers and loves filling out the forms, which may or may not be you individually. But if you bring that question of what brings me joy to all of those other inquiries that you're in the process of answering, you will become that congruent, authentic person that can then share joy with others. And right now, as we look at how our society is trying to restructure racial equity and sexual equity and career equity and all of those things that are truly our birthrights as humans, stable housing and food access. Asking the question of joy will bring solutions that feel good to everybody, not just to those who are making money at it.
Right. Awesome. I love it very much. And it's so funny. I'm working on my book that's supposed to come out in May, due to schedule to come out in May. And the chapter I wrote yesterday was don't do anything you don't want to do, and figure out a way to like it, or figure out how to way to let somebody else do it, or find ways to spend every minute that you can enjoy.
Absolutely. And that lesson was one of the biggest gifts that I received from my father, who was my huge inspiration for going into medicine because I saw him suffering. Even in the midst of all his suffering, he was a very joyful person. And he always was able to find some humor in some experience he was having, or humor in some challenge that had come his way. Even at the very end of his life, he was a joyful, joy-filled person. And he used to say exactly what you just said. He said, there's too many choices out there to be doing something that you don't love. And I remember thinking that. And of course, when you're on that trajectory to go into medicine and everybody wants you to be a doctor and you're going to have this great life, there's not a lot of support for giving that up if it's no longer giving you joy. And so his support in honoring that truth, that there are lots of choices out there, is one that I try to bring to clients without ever disavowing their choices or saying that they should be doing something different, because I don't know what any individual should be doing. You know what's best for you, but we often submerge that underneath things that we're told we should be doing. So, that's back to that courage piece in order to find congruence for what brings joy.
Yeah. Are you willing to completely brush aside all of the things that you were taught you were supposed to do and the way you were supposed
Right.
to be? Especially as Southern women, we're taught a lot of you
Oh,
know
yeah,
yeah, that are just not in every case serving to us, and it's
exactly.
difficult to say, oh, everybody's going to talk bad about me if I do that, and and getting past that and growing out of all that. All right, awesome. So what else do you want to add before we start wrapping things up? Again, you'll have access to the book Infinite Journey in the show notes. Any other last minute thoughts that you want to leave us with today?
Yeah, in creating this slim book, we chose a very bright, energetic color for the book because I wanted people to feel happy when they reached for it. So it's not a bland white or black or brown book, but there are almost 100 exercises in the book for people to try on. And there are a number of resources, and the coachesthatcare.org website has links to Amazon for the different books. And I would encourage people to order through that venue because we do receive a little bit of support from Amazon. It's like $1 per book, but every little bit helps, especially when it comes down to being able to provide services that we provide at no charge to those who need it. And so it's about completing that circle of engagement that we all have with each other that supports ourselves in the long run. And starting at the end of February, this will be announced on the website, we're going to have some book exploration Zoom calls that will be limited in size, where we can go through the book and support folks in the experiences that they're having with trying on some of these exercises, or the experiences that they're having with some of the resources that are in the book. And so that we can really support one another in continuing to move forward with creating these lives of joy, congruence, and happiness.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you could also, if someone wanted to um, work through this book together with their women's group or their book club, they could
Exactly.
get resources to do that. And
Yeah.
what amazing gifts to people who are struggling or, just want to live brighter, happier lives, more on purpose. That's, yeah. So your book is a gift in a lot of
Well,
different.
Lauren, I am really clear that everything that I've been through in my life and the experiences that I've had and the life that I get to enjoy today is not about me. It's really about how I can spread this experience of joy and happiness and love that I've been blessed with to others. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
Right. Absolutely right. Okay. Thank you again so very much for being with me. This was a beautiful interview. I'm looking forward to putting all the pictures together and putting all the notes together and getting my own copy of the book and looking through it myself. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. And so we're going to be back next week with one of my fellow authors in the transformation book, The Art and Truth of Transformation for Women. I'm blanking on the name as I always do every single week, but it will be a great interview. So join us back next week. And in the meantime, remember, happiness is a choice. You can always choose to be happy first. Thanks so much. See you next week.